They say travel broadens the mind, but for some Americans, it mostly broadens the confusion because the moment they step off the plane, the world refuses to install their settings. Clocks make no sense. Power plugs look alien, and suddenly freedom doesn't come with free refills. So here's what happens when American confidence meets international reality. A collection of stories so real, you'll wish they were fiction. I was working at a hotel in Barcelona when a couple from Texas came down to the front desk holding bottled water. They looked worried. The woman whispered, "Is your tap water safe?" I said, "Yes, perfectly." She frowned. "Then why do locals still drink bottled water?" I explained, because it tastes better, not because it's poison. The husband leaned in and said, "Seriously, in America, if people buy bottled water, something's wrong with the government." I smiled. "In Europe, it just means they like bubbles." He nodded slowly, suspicious of carbonation. A man from Florida entered a ryokan in Kyoto wearing his outdoor shoes inside. The hostess politely asked him to switch to slippers. He said, "I already paid for the room. I'll wear what I want." She bowed, embarrassed, and brought him indoor sandals anyway. He looked confused. "Wait, are these free?" When she said yes, he smiled. "Then I'll take them home as a souvenir." She froze. "They're for use, not for ownership." He blinked. "So it's like Airbnb, but for shoes." In Paris, a tourist stormed into a cafe, furious that his continental breakfast was smaller than expected. He pointed at the plate. "Where's the bacon, eggs, pancakes?" The waiter said, "Mishar, it's coffee, bread, butter, and jam." The American shouted, "That's not breakfast. That's depression." The waiter, unimpressed, said, "Then France is very depressed." Mishar, he left a 25% tip to teach them customer service. The funniest misunderstandings come from good intentions. Americans aren't trying to be rude. They're trying to make sense of difference through their own logic. But when you grow up in a culture where everything is big, fast, and customizable, simplicity can feel like disrespect. It's not arrogance, it's habit. In Rome, a man ordered an espresso and stared at the tiny cup like it was a prank. "Where's the rest of it?" he asked. The barista said, "That's all. It's espresso." He looked offended. "In America, we call this a sample." The barista smiled. "In Italy, we call it enough." He sighed and asked for a large one. The barista handed him 2 cups. "They're large." He drank both, still unsatisfied. At a Berlin intersection, a tourist crossed on red. A grandmother gasped, "You're teaching children bad habits." He said, "Ma'am, I looked both ways." She snapped, "That's not the point." He laughed. In America, red means check first. She glared. In Germany, it means red. An American businessman tried to pay with cash. The cashier said, "Sorry, we're cashless." He frowned. "What if I want to use cash?" She said, "Then you can't pay." He puffed his chest. "That's not freedom." She smiled. "It's efficiency." Culture shapes what people call normal. For Americans, freedom means options. For Europeans, freedom often means trust. In systems, instability. So when a machine won't take cash or a waiter refuses to rush, it's not oppression. It's just a different rhythm of life. A tourist at the Acropolis asked a guide, "When are they going to finish it?" The guide said, "It was finished 2,000 years ago." The man squinted. "Then why does it look broken?" The guide sighed. "Because time exists." He thought for a moment. "In America, we'd rebuild it." The guide nodded. "Yes, and in Greece, we remember it." An American family kept walking in the bike lane, nearly causing collisions. A cyclist rang his bell. The dad yelled, "Why are bikes on the sidewalk?" A local replied, That's not the sidewalk. That's for bikes, the dad said. Then, where do people walk? She pointed at the narrow path beside it. He scoffed. That's too small. She smiled. So are our cars. A man complained that the train was late. 40 seconds past schedule. The conductor apologized, but explained they were still on time by Swiss standards. The American scoffed. In America, we call this late. The conductor smiled. In Switzerland, we call this human. Precision cultures worship order. Individualist cultures worship flexibility. Neither is wrong. They just define success differently. One says we're efficient because we plan. The other says we're free because we improvise. Travel is where those philosophies collide. At a gas station near Montreal, an American panicked. The sign says $1.80 a liter. That's robbery. The attendant said it's per liter, not per gallon. He did the math. Oh, that's fine. Then he said, you should just put it in gallons so people understand. The attendant replied, people do understand, just not you. I once saw an American man in London order a cup of hot tea, please, but make it cold. The barista blinked. You want iced tea? The man said, no hot tea, just colder. She brought him lukewarm tea. He took one sip, made a face, and said, this tastes like regret. When she asked what he meant, he sighed. In America, we put sugar, lemon, ice. It's a drink. Here, it's a warning. The barista smiled. It's history in a cup. At a temple in Bangkok, a tourist asked the guide if he could climb onto a Buddhist statue for the selfie angle. The guide's face dropped. The man said, it's okay. I won't touch his head, just shoulder level. The guide quietly said, sir, please don't stand above the Buddha. The man laughed nervously. Oh, it's fine. I'm not religious. The guide replied, he is. Silence. Every country has invisible rules, and travel is just finding out you've broken most of them. But the lesson isn't to fear mistakes. It's to realize that respect changes shape from one border to another. If you can laugh at confusion, you're halfway to understanding. A man tried paying a street vendor with $. The vendor smiled apologetically. Only pesos. The man said, but dollars are stronger. The vendor nodded. Then you can exchange them. He muttered. So I have to convert my money. Yes, said the vendor. He sighed. That feels discriminatory. At a restaurant in Seoul, a man asked for a fork. The waiter politely handed him one. He smiled. You guys should really switch to these. Way easier. The waiter laughed. For you, the man nodded proudly, missing the irony. At the Egyptian Museum, a tourist frowned at an ancient coffin. This looks fake, he said. The guide replied, it's 3,000 years old. He squinted. Then why is it still here? The guide smiled. Because we preserved it. The man shrugged. In America, we'd have made a movie instead. American culture loves reinvention, the idea that old things must be improved. But travel reminds you that history isn't a flaw, it's a feature. Some places evolve, others remember, and both are trying to stay alive in their own way. A woman at a ski resort demanded a refund. She said the mountain view was cloudy. The clerk replied, Madam, the weather is not refundable. She crossed her arms. Then you shouldn't advertise views. He nodded slowly. Next time, we'll call the sky in advance. She blinked. Realizing she'd lost the argument against the Alps, a tourist from Ohio looked around Copacabana and whispered, Everyone's wearing less. A local said, It's hot. He nodded. But where are the rules? The local smiled. On vacation. By the end of the day, he'd joined the beach crowd, still confused, but freer than he'd expected. At a train station in Beijing, an American kept saying, "Excuse me?" While people flowed around him, he whispered, "They're cutting the line." A local explained, "There's no line. It's collective movement." He frowned. "But how do you know whose turn it is?" She smiled. "We just go." He stared in disbelief. "That's chaos," she said. "And yet, everyone gets on. Everywhere you go, order looks different. In some countries, it's quiet lines. In others, it's synchronized chaos. Americans grow up believing fairness means taking turns, but the rest of the world often sees fairness as moving together. A couple rented bikes and forgot to lock them overnight. The next morning, the bikes were still there. The husband gasped. No one stole them. The owner shrugged. Why would they? He said, because they're free. The owner smiled. Free to use, not to take. He stood there realizing this country didn't run on fear. It ran on trust. A tourist tried forcing his American Charger into an Aussie outlet. When it didn't fit, he asked, "Do you have normal plugs?" The receptionist said, "These are normal here." He grumbled. "You should really standardize the world." She smiled. "We tried that. You didn't sign." An American woman entered a public sauna in Helsinki, wearing a swimsuit. Everyone else was naked. She froze, turned to her friend, and whispered, "Oh my God, they forgot their clothes." A Finnish lady smiled and said, "No, we forgot our shame." The American hesitated. "But isn't this weird?" The woman shrugged. "Only if you think so. Culture decides what's private and what's natural. Americans guard modesty with fabric. Finns guard peace with silence. When those collide, you realize comfort isn't universal, it's cultural." A man in Mumbai ordered curry and asked for medium spice. When it arrived, he took one bite and nearly cried. He gasped, "This is lava." The waiter said, "That's our mild version." He wiped his eyes. Why would anyone eat pain? The waiter smiled because it reminds us we're alive. At a cafe in Kao, a tourist left a big tip. The waitress chased him down the street to return it. He said, "No, it's yours." She smiled. "Sir, you paid the full price already." He frowned, "But I'm being polite." She handed him the coins. So am I. A couple from New York sat at a seaside restaurant. After 15 minutes, they called the waiter. "Are you ignoring us?" He said calmly. "No, we are letting you talk." The woman looked stunned. "But we want to order." He smiled. "Of course. When you are ready." Americans fill silence with efficiency. Mediterranean cultures fill it with presence. Sometimes hospitality isn't about speed. It's about giving time, space to breathe. At a geyser park, an American asked, "Do you turn these on for tourists?" The ranger blinked. "They're geothermal. So, nature does it." "Yes," he nodded. "Cool business model." The ranger smiled. "We've been running it for a few million years." At sunset, a tourist heard the call to prayer and panicked. "Is that an alarm?" A local said, "Only for your soul." She laughed nervously, realizing she was witnessing faith, not fear. Later, she said it was the most peaceful sound I didn't understand. An American ordered a Guinness, took a sip, and said, "You know, this tastes like dirt." The bartender smiled. "That's how you know it's real." He frowned. "In America, we filter it better." The bartender said, "In Ireland, we let it breathe." They both laughed, but only one understood the metaphor. When Americans say better, they often mean faster, cleaner, newer. But not every country wants perfection polished. Some want it poured with foam, flaws, and stories that take their time. A tourist chewed gum on the street. A local warned him. "That's illegal." He laughed. What's next? Banning smiles. Minutes later, he got fined. He said, "This country hates freedom." The officer replied, "No, we just love clean floors." A visitor watched the astronomical clock go off. When it finished, he frowned. "That's it." A local said, "It's been doing that for 600 years. The man shrugged. "Then maybe it's time for an upgrade." The local smiled. "Maybe it's time you slowed down." I once met a woman who had spent a year abroad. When she came home, her friends asked, "So, did you find yourself?" She said, "No, but I finally found everyone else." That's the thing about travel. It humbles you. You stop asking, "Why is this so different?" and start wondering, "Why did I think it was supposed to be the same?" Americans abroad aren't stupid. They're shocked. Shocked to realize that the world functions beautifully without them. It's not arrogance, it's insulation. When you grow up in a country that feels like the center of everything, the rest of the map looks like background. But travel rewires that map. You learn that time can move slower, meals can last longer, and rules don't collapse just because they aren't yours. You learn that normal is local, and you realize that the most American thing about travel is thinking it will make the world more understandable, when really, it just makes it more human.